Okay, guys, so we talked in class a little bit about finding court rules that govern in criminal cases, and I just wanted to go over that in a little bit more detail in this video. With regard to federal rules, there are a few different things you can do. One is there's a great free website, the uscourts.gov website. If you just Google US court rules, that's the first hit that comes up. This is a free federal government website where you can get the text and PDF of federal rules of practice and procedure. And you can also look for amendments, pending amendments, proposed amendments, and so on. And look at the current ones that are in effect. And you'll see all the major types, right? Civil rules, just in case you wind up practicing in federal court, and with civil cases you can find those here. Criminal cases, these are clearly going to be the ones that govern on the trial level. Rules of appellate procedure would apply once a criminal case is appealed. And then, as always, in the federal landscape, you want to keep in mind the federal rules of evidence. Okay, so PDF of the rules of criminal procedure. This is updated annually. That's pretty typical. There aren't a lot of pending rule changes during the year. Usually the typical schedule is for new rules to go into effect in December. So you'll see that there's a new edition put out every December. But as I mentioned before, you can look at proposed rules and pending rules also on this website. Okay, again, rules of evidence. And then you can link to the different local court rules. So I mentioned in class you have to keep in mind the general rules that apply. So again, if you were in trial court in the Massachusetts Federal District Court, you would be looking at the federal rules of criminal procedure, and then you also want to look for local rules for the Mass Federal District Court. And this is basically a link on this U.S. court website where you can go and find local rules easily. So this links you to the Mass Federal District Court website. Sometimes you have to dig a little bit. Usually it's under something like general information. And you can link to the rules here. Okay. And find the local rules that might apply. It's always important to be aware of those. Alright, so that's the main thing to keep in mind. Good free source for federal rules, this US courts.gov site. For state rules, again, this is going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, so just sort of investigate wherever you wind up practicing. In Mass, I think the best site is the website for the Massachusetts Trial Court Law Libraries. These are public law libraries that are located throughout the Commonwealth. There are 17 of them, and like I said, they're open to the public. If you practice anywhere near them, it's definitely worth going to check them out, getting to know their collections, their librarians. And I think one of the most valuable things that they have are court rules. And you'll notice there's another link under here for ebooks. If you have a Kindle or an iPad, with a Kindle app, you can download a lot of court rules for free. That's nice because you can highlight, annotate, have it with you easily in court instead of carrying around a book. So just something to keep in mind. This site is very, very diligently updated. And this is something you will have looked at in class, but just to remind you, you get the general, right, civil, criminal, and appellate rules, and then the rules for the individual courts. Right, so important to keep in mind. All of these uniform trial court rules apply to all the trial courts, all different departments, including Superior Court and District Court, which clearly are the ones that have jurisdiction over criminal cases. Here you get your criminal rule, or your Superior Court rules, standing orders for Superior Court, District Court rules of criminal procedure, and then standing orders for District Court. And then also keep in mind Boston Municipal Court. Okay, and then these are the time standards. Okay, so really good free resource just to keep in mind. In terms of Lexis and Westlaw, which you'll likely use if you want the annotations, right? These free websites are just going to have the text of the rule. If you want to find cases that cite the rules or references to secondary sources, that's when you're going to want to think about paying for Lexis and Westlaw. But keep in mind that it can often be a lot quicker just to Google and use a free court website if you just want the text of the rule, right? And you aren't necessarily interested in the interpretive material. So on Westlaw next, you want to browse for your jurisdiction. We'll just look at Mass. And the court rules are typically going to be lumped with statutes, right? It's because they're published in print with the statutes. So when you look in, this page will look familiar because this is where we've gone a lot to do statutory research, right? This is the main part of the code, the constitutional provisions up top. And then you get all the different court rules, right? The general, civil, criminal, appellate. We don't have any codified rules of evidence in Massachusetts, so you won't see that. That's common law in Mass, which would definitely vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, standing orders, and so on. So you could go in, if you knew you were looking for something in the Mass Rules of Criminal Procedure, you could go right in and look at that. Right? Or you could run a broad search. Okay, just to show you something. Well, I'll show you on the federal level as well. For federal court rules, like I said, they're published with statutes. So you'd find them in the United States Code Annotated on Westlaw or the United States Code Service on Lexis. Lexis puts all the court rules at the end, so you'd see them sort of at the bottom. Westlaw groups them within the area of the code that they apply. So the bankruptcy rules are with Title 11 bankruptcy. The criminal rules are with Title 18, which is crimes and criminal procedure, right? Just in case you're ever looking, the civil rules and the evidentiary rules are with Title 28, judiciary and judicial procedure. Okay, so similar deal there. Just to give you one more example for New York. Okay. You could go right into the rules of court. This was the same with Massachusetts too. Federal court rules. So these are going to be the local federal court rules, right, for the district courts in New York, and then for the Second Circuit. Okay. In Mass, this would be for the Mass District Court in the First Circuit. Okay, so you could go right into the rules of court. Okay, so keep in mind in New York City, the Supreme Court has civil and criminal jurisdiction. So you'd want to go look whichever department you were in, maybe see if there were any applicable rules. Outside of the city, it's the local courts that have jurisdiction over criminal cases. So again, you'd want to find the appropriate court and go make sure you aren't missing anything in terms of local court rules. The other thing to keep in mind for New York and California, they're the big two examples, is that most of their criminal procedure rules have actually been codified as statutes. So we've looked before at New York CPL, part of their code, criminal procedure law. So a lot of what on the federal level would be in the rules of criminal procedure, or in Massachusetts would be in our state rules of criminal procedure, and New York and California are actually embedded in their statutory code. So just keep in mind that that's sort of how it works. In all jurisdictions, it's important to be aware that procedural concerns are often laid out in statutes, but that's even true more so in New York and California. Okay, so you'd want to take a look at these for procedural things, right? And then, like I said, also be aware of the rules of court. Okay, all right. On Lexis, actually, let me just show you on Westlaw Classic, because this will look very similar on Lexis.com. You could browse the directory, right, and get into your jurisdiction. So we'll just use Massachusetts again. Notice that there's a folder for court rules, okay, right under statutes. So you could go and you could just search court rules. This is searching all court rules, right? So if you're just looking for criminal rules, this might be a little bit annoying because you're going to get hits for civil as well. So you could go to the table of contents, and this is where you'll notice you're actually getting pushed back into statutes, because again, court rules are published by these publishers with statutes. So the federal ones, so these would be for District Court, First Circuit, Bankruptcy Court. Okay. And then within our statutory code, just like this looked on Westlaw Next, right, you get the statutes and the Constitution, and then the different rules. Okay, so here's where you could just pick, say, if you wanted to search the Mass Rules of Criminal Procedure, maybe the standing orders. I can never see these right off the bat. We want to search the rules of the Superior Court. Okay. Just gonna scan here. Make sure we've got everything that might be applicable. Okay. Unchecked that accidentally. So let's imagine we want rules of the Superior Court, standing orders, and then you can just search those 3 selections. Okay, and you have to at this point run the terms and connector search, which is a little bit annoying. Okay, but that's how you find them. Basically, you browse. And again, just to show you sort of what the difference is between looking at these on a free site versus on Westlaw, we're going to look at Rule 14 of the Mass Rules of Criminal Procedure, which is the big discovery rule. If you maximize and look at it, you'll notice, of course, again, this is what people pay for. In addition to the text of the rule, you're getting a lot of annotations. Okay, so these are notes from the committee that drafted the rules, which can be very helpful in terms of interpreting the meaning. Lots and lots of notes. You can use this bar on the left to jump into exactly what you're interested in. So we could look at notes of decision if we wanted to see how courts have interpreted this particular provision. Okay, broken down into categories. If we wanted to look at maybe treatises, we wanted to find a relevant mass practice section or something to help us out, you could look at this, and you can see that there are tons and tons of these, right? It's a mass practice citation. So again, this is what you're paying for, is this extra content. All right, and again, that will work pretty similarly on Lexis. You want to look under statutes and court rules. Just show you quickly Lexis Advance. Lexis Advance, I've noticed it tends to work better if you do a search and then you filter rather than just browsing. So I'm just going to run a discovery search. You notice I've got it set. There's no court rules heading. Okay, so you're going to look under statutes and legislation, and then I set the jurisdiction and I chose criminal law and procedure as a topic. Okay, and we're just going to run a search for discovery. And we got 207 hits, and you'll notice they're from the statutory code, and then they've broken out court rules. Okay, and then this is a bunch of other stuff, session laws, constitutions, bills. So if you weren't particularly interested in having to sift through the other, maybe you want to make sure you don't miss important statutory provisions and then look at court rules. You could filter out that other stuff. Again, you'll see that Rule 14 is up top. Right, this is going to be a rule for federal court, so you're not particularly interested if you're talking about, say, Superior Court or District Court. And statutory provisions mixed in, a random probate and family court rule. Okay, and so on. The other option on Lexis Advance, instead of running a search and setting filters, is to actually browse sources. Okay. Keep in mind, again, you're not going to see a court rules heading unless I'm overlooking it. So you're going to want to look at statutes and legislation. You can filter, choose your jurisdiction. Again, we'll just keep working with Massachusetts. Okay. Then there is a heading here for state and federal court rules. Similar list, and you could browse this way, right? If you decided to start from this point, you could also add the source. Okay. All right, so if anybody has any questions about finding court rules, free sources or using subscription databases, just let me know. And of course, there are print resources like the desk book that I held up in class, where you can find all of them in one place and you can make tabs and sort of have your own copy to keep around. So let me know if you have any further questions, and we'll move on to talk about finding information on filing motions and then forms for motions so you don't have to draft them from scratch.